Okay, so I guess I'm going to go ahead and get started. We are pretty much at the end of Pride Month. I was going to see if I could cram two chapters in, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to do another chapter just because I haven't been getting a lot of views. So this is going to be the last chapter I review for Pride Month. And so today I'm going to be reviewing chapter 5. And this is from my book, Blaming on Drastic Manufacturing of Black Homophobia and Performative Masculinity. It is available on Amazon. All right, let's get to chapter 5. Chapter 5, The Man is the Prize, the mythology of straight male superiority. Masculinity, the gold standard of validation. In the Black community, the narrative that positions men, specifically heterosexual Black men, as the ultimate prize is so deeply embedded that it often goes unchallenged. From childhood, we are fed the same story. Men are providers, protectors, and leaders, the ones to pursue, to impress, to center. The message is clear. A Black man with resources, ambition, and masculinity is the rarest gem, the pinnacle of success for both women and, whether acknowledged or not, other men. This belief system is not just about relationships. It shapes power dynamics, social hierarchies, and even the way we perceive our own worth. But there's a contradiction at the heart of this prize mentality. If masculine men are the prize, why are so many Black women and Black gay men the most conditioned to chase this prize end up feeling devalued, disrespected, and discarded? Why does the supposed prize offer so little fulfillment, safety, or genuine partnership? The answer lies in the mythology itself. The prize isn't about men being inherently more valuable. It's about power, control, and validation. It's about a community conditioned to worship masculinity while devaluing femininity. When a community devalues women while glorifying men, it creates an inevitable consequence. Boys internalize the belief that masculinity is the highest form of value. Attraction, admiration, and even love becomes less about connection and more about achieving proximity to power. This conditioning doesn't just shape heterosexual relationships, it profoundly impacts how Black gay boys and men see themselves and each other. If men are the prize, what does that mean for boys who are taught to desire men? How does that shape their understanding of love, sex, and self worth? The prize mentality is more than a social script. It's an indoctrination. And like all indoctrination, it thrives on hierarchy, exclusion, and unspoken contradictions. This chapter will unpack how the mythology of straight male superiority distorts relationships, fuels competition, and leaves both Black women and gay Black men chasing validation from men who were never taught to value them in return. To understand how the man is the prize narrative took root, we have to look at history, specifically how Black masculinity was forced under systemic oppression. During slavery, Black men were stripped of autonomy, power, and dignity. Their bodies were commodified, their families torn apart, and their humanity denied. In response, survival demanded a redefinition of manhood, one rooted in resilience, strength, and defiance. Post-slavery, this needed to assert value Post-slavery, this need to assert value continued, with Black masculinity becoming a symbol of resistance against dehumanization. The civil rights and Black power movement further solidified this image. Black men were positioned as leaders, protectors, and symbols of progress. But this framing came with a cost. It sidelined Black women and erased queer voices. Leadership was framed as inherently male, and masculinity became synonymous with strength, stoicism, and dominance. Femininity was seen as weakness, and emotional expression became a liability. This historical burden of proving worth meant that Black men were not just fighting racism, they were also fighting to reclaim a manhood that white supremacy has systematically denied. But instead of creating an inclusive vision of empowerment, the response often mirrored the very hierarchies it sought to dismantle. Masculinity became a prize to be earned, defended, and worshipped, not just by women, but by the community at large. For black gay boys and men, this historical construction created a profound contradiction. On one hand, we were told that men, black men, were the pinnacle of value. On the other hand, our desire for men was treated as deviant, unnatural, and shameful. We were conditioned to see men as the prize, but punished for wanting them. This contradiction didn't just create external stigma, it fueled internalized shame, fractured identities, and an endless cycle of seeking validation from men who have been taught to withhold it. At the core of the prize mentality lies a fundamental distortion of desire. In a world where masculinity is equated with power and dominance, sexual attraction is no longer viewed as an organic human experience, but a transaction. Men disconnected from their own femininity struggle to perceive desire as reciprocal. Instead, they frame it as something to earn, weaponize, or exploit. Herein lies the paradox of those who subscribe to the prize mentality while also engaging in slut shaming towards women. Despite being raised to believe that men are the ultimate prize in relationships, they cannot fathom a woman genuinely desiring a man without manipulation, obligation, or coercion. In their eyes, sex is not an exchange of mutual pleasure, but a reward that men must earn from women. This mindset, reinforced by patriarchal conditioning, systematically devalues female sexuality and autonomy. Women who confidently embrace their sexuality disrupt this dynamic, challenging the notion that men alone hold the power in sexual relationships. This is why such women are labeled as hoes in thoughts because at their core, these men view women's sexuality as something to conquer, not something women can freely own and express. In this framework, women who are not the prize themselves, in this framework, women are not the prize themselves, but the gatekeepers of a prize that validates male superiority. The same revulsion that is directed at gay men. If masculinity is about dominance, then being seen as an object of attraction is viewed as emasculating. Gay men expose this fragility of performative masculinity by demonstrating that men can be pursued, admired, and desired without power games. This is why homophobia within the black community often has less to do with morality and more to do with control. Research demonstrates that this hostility stems not from religious or cultural values, but from threats to patriarchal power structures. It's not the existence of same sex attraction that offends, it's the challenge to the belief that the masculine should always lead the pursuit, controlling both desire and its fulfillment. For many black gay boys, this fear of desire becomes deeply internalized. We grow up believing that our attraction to men is not just abnormal but shameful, a betrayal of the very framework that defines our worth. In response, we chase validation, seeking approval from the same men who are repulsed by the desire we feel for them. This is how the prize mentality traps us in a cycle of self denial and longing, leaving us perpetually reaching for something we were conditioned to seek but never meant to claim. Homosexuality strikes at the core of patriarchal conditioning, where control, not connection, defines worth. It's not just about who is desired, but who gets validated in that dynamic. When men occupy both sides of attraction, pursuer and pursued, it dismantles the carefully constructed hierarchy that places masculinity above all else. This is why homophobia within the black community often has less to do with morality and more to do with optics. Research demonstrates that this hostility stems not from religious or cultural values, but from threats to patriarchal power structures. It's not the existence of same sex attraction that offends. It's the challenge to the belief that the masculine should always lead the pursuit, controlling both desire and its fulfillment. Many straight men do not perceive themselves as objects of desire. This is why many will walk outside half dressed, showcasing their bodies without hesitation. yet react with anger if someone expresses attraction towards them. To them, being desired is a feminine role, one that contradicts the dominance and control masculine is supposed to embody. They expect queer men to look away to suppress any acknowledgement of their attractiveness, as if being desired by another man is an insult rather than a simple reality. Yet these same men will claim that if a woman walks outside in revealing clothing, she is asking for it. They believe that women's bodies exist for public consumption and that their appearance grants others the right to sexualize or even violate them. Meanwhile, they refuse to be seen in the same way, demanding the freedom to present their bodies as they choose while denying others the right to respond. It is not truly about modesty or respect, but about control, the belief that only they can dictate who is allowed to desire them. The concept of the male gaze, first introduced by Laura Mulvey, explains how visual media is structured around the perspective of a heterosexual male viewer. Women are not seen as autonomous individuals, but as objects of male pleasure. Their value defined by how well they cater to male desire. But what often goes unspoken is how the male gaze extends beyond film and media, reshaping real world power dynamics and reinforcing the man is the prize narrative within the Black community. In cultural spaces, women are often reduced to props in an elaborate performance of male desirability. When men showcase their female partners, the message isn't look at her, it's look at me, the man worthy of having her. This performance reveals how male desires operates through misdirection. Women serve as mirrors reflecting male worth rather than being the true object of desire. This dynamic plays out in predictable patterns. Men display women as trophies that validate their own desirability. Female partners become evidence of male worth rather than autonomous beings. When a man says, "Look at my woman," what he really means is, "Look at how desirable I must be." This elaborate charade serves to maintain a fiction of a pure heterosexual desire while ultimately centering male beauty and worth. The performance requires constant maintenance. Men must appear desirable without acknowledging that they want to be desired. Women must perform attraction while actually serving as props. Everyone must pretend that this exhausting dance is natural. But this admiration is not just about sex, it's about acceptance. In both heterosexual and queer spaces, Black men are taught that their desirability equals affirmation. And when boys are raised to believe that men are the ultimate standard, it is only natural that some will begin to desire men, not just sexually, but as symbols of validation and self worth. Mainstream heterosexual pornography offers one of the clearest examples of how the male gaze shapes perception of desire and worth. While marketed, excuse me, while marketed as entertainment for straight men, its focus remains squarely on male power and validation. The camera centers male bodies and male pleasure, while women serve primarily as vehicles for demonstrating male sexuality. This creates a complex dynamic for young viewers, particularly Black boys. Research indicates that early exposure to pornographic content shapes not just sexual expectations but fundamental understanding of power and validation. While conveniently, while conventional wisdom suggests boys identify with a dominant male figure, the reality is more nuanced. Viewers often unconsciously identify with the position of the person receiving pleasure and attention, typically the submissive partner. The homoerotic undertones of mainstream pornography reveal an often overlooked contradiction. While supposedly celebrating heterosexual desire, these materials demand that male viewers focus intensely on male bodies and performance. They require men to measure themselves against male sexual prowess and seek validation through male centered displays of power. This creates a framework where male approval becomes the ultimate marker of worth, even as heterosexual performance remains mandatory. The result is a complex relationship with desire, where seeking male validation becomes normalized, while actual attraction to men must be denied or suppressed. The impact on identity formation is profound. Young boys learn early that male attention equals validation, yet this lesson comes wrapped in layers of denial and shame. The messaging is contradictory. Men are the ultimate prize, the standard of value, yet openly desiring male approval or attention marks one as deviant. This contradiction creates a cycle where male validation is constantly sought, yet the pursuit must be disguised. As a result, complex heterosexual performances emerge while male approval remains the true goal. For Black gay youth, this dynamic is particularly damaging. The same content that teaches them to value male attention also teaches them to hate themselves for wanting it. This creates a foundation for future relationships where validation seeking behaviors become entangled with shame, desire, and self worth. The broader implications extend beyond individual psychology into community dynamics. When pornography centers male pleasure and power while demanding female submission, it reinforces the man as the prize mentality that shapes both heterosexual and queer relationships. The result is a community where everyone, regardless of gender or orientation, learns to measure their worth through male validation, even as they maintain elaborate performances of heterosexual desire. This contradiction lies at the heart of the prize mentality. Boys are taught from an early age that men hold the highest value, that masculinity is power and power is desirable. Yet, when some boys take that lesson to its logical conclusion, developing romantic or sexual attraction to men, they are punished, ridiculed, and shamed. The community that glorifies men cannot comprehend why some boys might internalize that glorification in the form of desire. But why wouldn't they? If men are framed as the ultimate prize, the standard of success, power, and validation, why would attraction to men be surprising? The issue is not desire itself, it's the community's refusal to confront the cultural conditioning that fuels it. This is why Black gay boys often grow up feeling fractured, taught to worship masculinity while being shamed for wanting what they've been told is most valuable. The male gaze does not just shape, desires, it shapes self worth. It teaches boys that their value lies not in who they are, but in how well they receive validation from other men. This is why even straight men find themselves competing for male approval because, under the prize mentality, the highest form of worth is being seen, admired, and validated by other men. I just want to point out because I just want to make the connection between chapter 3 and chapter 5 and well chapter 4 also, because on one hand they're emasculating you to say that you're not a real man. You're being dominated by your mother who's beating you into submission. Your father is telling you that you throw the football like a girl, so you're not really masculine. You don't have masculinity. They're basically putting you in the same category as a girl, right? And so in order to get that validation, because you don't have it, you have to get it from another man. Because they're telling you you're not really a boy, you're not really a man. So in order to get that valid, you have to get it from another man. And if your father's absent, he's not giving it to you. So what else are you supposed to do but to get it through homosexuality? Of course, you're going to find men more desirable than women. Women can't validate you. Only a man can do that because you have already taught us that men are the standard of worth. The idea that Black men are the prize reveals a disturbing paradox that begins in childhood. Black boys often face harsh physical punishment from their mothers, particularly for any perceived femininity or vulnerability. Yet, as these same boys reach adulthood, many mothers shift to treating their sons as emotional proxies for absent male partners, creating inappropriate boundaries and unhealthy attachments. While outsiders often misinterpret this dynamic as coddling or overprotection, the reality is far more insidious. The mother's the mother's apparent devotion cooking for her son's favorite meals, excessive pampering, public displays of affection is purely transactional. These gestures of care come with strings attached and can be withdrawn the moment her son fails to meet her demands. Unable to control him through physical violence as she once did, she weaponizes nurturing instead. The manipulation takes many forms. She routinely violates his privacy, sharing intimate details of his life with others to maintain social control. She imposes impossible expectation. Excuse me. She imposes impossible expectations, setting him up for failure so she can position herself as the one who saved him. His feelings, dreams, and personal boundaries mean nothing. He exists solely as an extension of her needs, as a source of validation and service. The manipulation extends into the social sphere, where sons become props for the mother's ego. She parades him around like a prized possession, using his achievements, appearance, and status for her own validation. Look at my son becomes less about maternal pride and more about social currency. The relationship becomes inappropriately enmeshed with mothers expecting their sons to fulfill partnership like roles, emotional confidant, financial provider, and constant source of attention and validation. This pattern of maternal controlling shifting from physical violence into excuse me this pattern of maternal control shifting from physical violence in childhood to emotional manipulation in adulthood creates deep psychological wounds that ripple through the broader community. The very mothers who once beat femininity out of their sons later demand a level of emotional intimacy that borders on emotional incest, creating men who struggle with attachment and setting boundaries. These damaged dynamics then become the foundation for how Black men are positioned within society, perpetuating cycles of toxic relationships and validating seeking behavior. The prize mentality creates a devastating cycle. Black boys are abused in childhood and then elevated to inappropriate emotional roles in adulthood. These wounded men then become the prizes others chase, perpetuating patterns of abuse and validation seeking behavior. Their early trauma manifests as difficulty with emotional intimacy and the tendency to weaponize their prize status. They seek validation through control and dominance, often replicating the same abuse they experience. But here's the truth: the scarcely complex is a lie. There is no shortage of love, respect, or partnership, only a system designed to make us believe otherwise. The real scarcely lies in healing and confronting how maternal abuse shapes Black men's relationship with themselves and others. Until we dismantle both the prize mentality and the mother son paradox that feeds it, until we reject the lie that men who carry deep childhood wounds are somehow prizes to be won, we will remain trapped in a cycle of trauma, competition, and self denial. In the Black community, heterosexual Black men are positioned as social capital. A good Black man is seen as rare, desirable, and worth fighting for. This scarcity complex reinforces competition among women, among queer men, and even among straight men. Everyone is vying for proximity to the prize, not because of who the man is, but because of what his validation represents. For Black women, this conditioning starts early. They're taught that their worth is tied to their ability to secure a man, that a relationship with a good Black man is the ultimate achievement. This dynamic creates imbalanced relationships where women are expected to perform emotional labor, tolerate disrespect, and sacrifice their own needs, all in pursuit of a prize that offers little in return. For Black gay boys and men, the conditioning is even more complex. We are taught to see straight masculine men as the prize, even when those men devalue, dismiss, or ridicule us. We learn to desire the very men who were taught to view us as inferior, and because the community frames men as the ultimate standard, we often internalize the belief that our own masculinity, no matter how authentic, will never measure up. The scarcity complex is one of the most powerful forces upholding the prize mentality. The narrative goes like this: Good black men are rare. If you find one, hold onto him at all costs. If you lose him, it's your fault. You weren't good enough. This manufacturer scarcely ignores the deeper roots of dysfunction within the community, often stemming from early abuse and unhealthy mother son dynamics, the very issues the community claims to condemn. They're scarcely complex, doesn't just affect women. It fuels desperation among black gay men as well. We are taught that male validation is limited, that love, respect, and acceptance are finite resources. As a result, we compete against women, against each other, and even against ourselves. We shrink, conform, and perform, all in hopes of winning a prize that was never designed to nourish us in the first place. Straight men often compete with women for the attention, validation, and admiration of other men. As masculinity is seen as the highest form of social value, and in a world where male recognition is the ultimate form of social currency, more valuable than desire from women, men seek approval through dominance rather than connection. They downplay women's interests to assert superiority, police each other's masculinity to maintain hierarchy, and turn friendships into competitions rather than spaces for genuine support. Many heterosexual men, despite having no sexual attraction to men, resent how easily women receive male attention, praise, and admiration. They feel slighted by the ease with which women are complimented and desired, while they must constantly prove themselves to even earn a fraction of that recognition. This fuels their need to outperform, dominate conversations, and assert their status in professional and social spaces, ensuring that they, not women, remain the primary recipients of male validation. I want you to know that a lot of times they actually are jealous of their, even if they are heterosexual, if their male friends get a woman and that woman is getting more attention than them, they get jealous. They're trying to compete against that woman, but they don't want to compete sexually. I don't know how they're going to compete. You can't compete with a woman. Even in romantic and sexual, and let me stop. Let me go back for a second. Because this creates another dynamic, because if they're competing with women that are getting validation from men, but they're not willing to go there sexually because they are heterosexual. Yet gay men pose an even greater threat, because yes, we can be your friend, we can play football, watch sports, and they have sex with other men. So how are you going to compete with a gay man? How are you going to compete? It's just another layer of jealousy, trying to compete for male validation. You can't compete for male validation from a woman, or I know I don't. I mean, these men, I guess they call themselves straight, but they do hook up with gay men. At the end of the day, we are more intimate with these men more than their male friends. I don't know that these other men actually know what's going on, or if they're in denial. But at the end of the day, they're going to resent. They're going to resent us. They're going to resent us because they can't compete against someone who is intimate with another man, and they're not intimate in that way. Now, let me continue. Even in romantic and sexual contexts, men seek approval from their peers more than genuine connection with women. Bragging about sexual conquest is less about the women involved and more about proving their worth to other men. Ultimately, this competition reinforces a hierarchy where male approval holds more weight than meaningful relationships, reducing both men and women to tools in a power struggle rather than individuals seeking genuine intimacy, and so the cycle continues. Everyone is fighting for recognition from those who were never taught to give it freely, clinging to the belief that proximity to masculinity somehow equates to safety, love, or worth. In the end, the scarcity complex doesn't just breed competition, it assures that no one ever truly wins. The prize mentality does not just elevate men, it weaponizes masculinity itself. When black men are taught to view themselves as the ultimate prize, relationships cease to be spaces for connection and instead become battlegrounds for validation. This mentality shifts the focus from mutual respect and care to competition. When everyone is fighting for proximity to power, the prize is not just the man himself, but the status, safety, and social currency associated with his approval. This competition extends far beyond romantic relationships. It infiltrates friendships, family dynamics, and broader community interactions, creating an environment where male validation dictates worth. Women are taught to measure their value on how well they can attract and keep a man, while queer men often find themselves mimicking hypermasculine traits in an attempt to be seen as equally desirable or worthy. Even straight men are not exempt. They too compete with women for male approval, whether through camaraderie, dominance, or social status. In this framework, masculinity becomes less about identity and more about control. It determines who gets respect, who holds power, and who is seen as valuable within the community. Vulnerability, emotional expression, and nurturing qualities traditionally associated with femininity are dismissed as signs of weakness, further entrenching the idea that only those who perform masculinity at its highest level deserve recognition. Ultimately, the prize mentality doesn't just divide individuals, it fractures entire communities. It reinforces hierarchies that prioritize dominance over connection, competition over collaboration, and validation over genuine self worth. In the end, everyone loses chasing a prize that was never designed to bring fulfillment, only further um, insecurity and division. In a community that glorifies men while dividing women and queer identities, desire itself becomes an act of betrayal. While gay black boys develop romantic or sexual attraction toward men, they are not just expressing affection. They are seen as undermining the hierarchy that places straight masculinity at the top. The very desire they were conditioned to have is now framed as deviant, weak, or predatory. This betrayal is not just external, it becomes internalized. Black gay boys learn to hate their own desires, seeing themselves as proof of inferiority. They suppress attraction, perform hypermasculinity, and seek validation from the very men who reject them. It's a vicious cycle, one that leaves many black gay men feeling fractured, ashamed, and unworthy of love. The male gaze extends beyond the media. It shapes how black men are viewed in everyday life and heterosexual spaces. Black men are framed as powerful, rare, and worthy of pursuit. In queer spaces, the same hierarchy persists. Masculine presenting men are seen as the most desirable, while feminine presenting men are marginalized. For black gay boys, this hierarchy creates an impossible standard. We are taught to admire men while simultaneously being told that we can never embody the masculinity we are taught to worship. The result, a constant sense of inadequacy, a belief our worth is contingent on how closely we align with straight male ideals. One of the most overlooked widespread forms of sexual grooming in the black community is early exposure to pornography. Unlike traditional narratives of abuse, this grooming operates under the guise of education. Older male relatives, cousins, uncles, or even fathers introduce young boys to porn not as an option but as an expectation. The justification is always the same. I'm teaching him how to be a man. But what they are actually teaching is submission, the desires of men, to the expectations of masculinity, and to the performance of sex as a tool of validation rather than personal fulfillment. Boys grow into men who believe that to be validated, they must win the approval of other men through power, through sex, through competition. The pressure to perform is relentless, and in the end, no one truly arrives because masculinity, as it is taught, is not a stable identity. It is a performance that must be continuously upheld, reinforced, and defended. While Okay. While marketed as heterosexual entertainment, pornography is undeniably homoerotic. It conditions men to fixate on other men's bodies, performances, and sexual prowess, teaching them that their worth is measured in comparison to other men, boys watching these scenes are not just learning how to desire women, they're learning how to receive attention and validation from men. Under the male gaze, black boys relate to the woman, not the man, internalizing the belief that validation comes through submission. The camera lingers on male dominance, male pleasure, male control, reinforcing the idea that power, not intimacy, is the ultimate marker of masculinity. All right. For black gay men, the prize mentality is complex. We're taught that we can't possess the same power or status as straight men. So we seek validation by aligning ourselves with them. This proximity becomes a way to access the power we're denied elsewhere. This dynamic also impacts how others, especially women and queer men, interact with black men. Women are socialized to tie their worth to securing a man's attention and approval, while queer men, particularly those who admire black masculinity, seek validation through sex with straight presenting men to feel desired and validated. In this dynamic, black men often withhold the very validation others crave. Their worth is not seen as inherently valuable in the emotional sense, but is tied to their external qualities. How they can provide social currency. This leaves a void of unmet emotional needs, both for those who desire approval and for the men themselves, who are conditioned not to seek emotional fulfillment or connection. As a result, a toxic cycle of competition and unfulfillment is perpetuated. Women and queer men often chase after a prize that can never truly be attained, while black men themselves struggle with the pressure to remain distant and emotionally unavailable. This system doesn't allow for genuine connection or mutual understanding, but rather fosters division, alienation, and a profound sense of emptiness. No one truly wins. What is prized is not the person, but the status they represent. For black gay men, this dynamic creates a profound paradox. We're taught to desire men, yet we are simultaneously told that our desires are unnatural or deviant. Our attraction to men is often seen as through a distorted lens, either dismissed entirely or pathologized in ways that make us feel as though our existence itself is wrong. The very masculine we are drawn to, especially black masculinity, is revered by society, but we are made to feel disconnected from it, positioned outside of its approval. This creates a painful irony. We chase validation from men who were taught to view us as inferior, less than, or even threatening. We internalize the belief that to be worthy, we must earn their approval, often by conforming to societal expectations of masculinity that were never meant for us. In the process, we lose sight of our own value, believing that if we can just be enough for them, and we can get them to see us as desirable, worthy, or masculine enough, we will finally be whole or validated. But this pursuit of approval from men who have been conditioned to reject us is not only futile but deeply damaging. We place our self worth in the hands of those who have been taught to see us as lesser. We chase a validation that, even if attained, can never be fulfilling because it is built on a false hierarchical structure that diminishes us at the core. The paradox lies in the fact that the more we try to earn their validation, the further we drift from embracing our own sense of self worth, independent of their approval. In this system, we are caught in an endless cycle of competition and self denial, never truly receiving the love or acceptance we crave. And yet, the desire persists because we are taught to seek approval and respect from the very people who have been conditioned to see us as undeserving. It is a cycle that prevents us from seeing ourselves as whole, conditioning, excuse me, unconditional, unconditionally valuable and deserving of love as we are without needing to prove our worth through the eyes of those who don't understand us or see our humanity. When boys are raised with the belief that men are the ultimate standard of success, strength, and validation, attraction to men, whether romantic, sexual, or social, becomes an inevitable outcome of this conditioning. This attraction is not solely about sexuality, it's deeply entwined with power dynamics, social hierarchies, and the construction of self worth. Boys are taught that male approval is the gold standard, and this belief shapes their desires, driving them to seek validation from men, often at the cost of their own identity and emotional well being. The prize mentality doesn't just harm women, it damages everyone involved. For men, it creates vicious cycles where they feel pressured to embody hypermasculinity, suppressing their vulnerabilities and emotional needs in favor of maintaining power and status. For women, it enforces the belief that their value is contingent on securing male approval, leaving them trapped in roles that demand emotional labor and submission. And for queer men, it reinforces a hierarchy where their value is seen as lesser compared to straight masculinity, forcing them to seek validation from the very men who have been conditioned to see them as inferior. Um, in many heterosexual relationships within the black community, black women are conditioned to go to extreme lengths to keep a man, often bending over backwards to meet his needs and desires. This effort manifests in various ways, providing for him financially, tolerating infidelity, altering their appearance to fit Eurocentric beauty standards, and carrying the full weight of domestic labor. Black women often find themselves responsible for cooking, cleaning, and maintaining the household, all while holding down jobs and financially supporting their partners. Despite these sacrifices, they are still expected to remain patient, nurturing, and accommodating, believing if they do enough, love and commitment will follow. They endure cheating and emotional neglect, convincing themselves that it's part of the price they must pay to maintain a relationship. The pressure to secure and keep a man is so deeply ingrained that many black women internalize the belief that their worth is contingent upon their ability to serve, provide, and tolerate mistreatment. Meanwhile, black men positioned as the prize often feel little pressure to reciprocate. Many grow up being told that their mere presence is valuable, while women are taught that they must earn affection through labor and sacrifice. This imbalance is reinforced generationally, with black mothers unknowingly upholding the cycle, raising their daughters to be selfless caregivers while instilling in their sons the expectation of unconditional devotion. As a result, relationships become one sided, transactional, and emotionally draining for black women who invest their time, energy, and resources without receiving the same level of care in return. The burden of love, labor, and loyalty falls squarely on their shoulders, leaving them exhausted and unfulfilled, while the men remain largely unchallenged in their roles. This toxic dynamic continues to rob black women of the emotional support and partnership they deserve, trapping them in endless cycles of overextension and unreciprocated effort. The prize mentality does not vanish within queer relationships, it simply reshapes itself. In many black queer spaces, masculine presenting men are elevated as the most desirable, while feminine presenting men are marginalized. Tops are glorified as dominant and desirable, while bottoms are shamed, often labeled as weak, needy, or less manly. This internalized hierarchy mirrors the broader societal structure where proximity to traditional masculinity equates to higher value. Within the gay community, masculinity is gold, the ultimate prize everyone is fighting to attain and possess. Masculine men are presented as the peak of desirability, while those perceived as feminine are pushed to the margins. Bottom shaming functions much like slut shaming in heterosexual relationships. Just as women are criticized for being sexually assertive, bottoms are shamed for pursuing masculine men rather than waiting to be pursued. In a world where masculinity is framed as power and control, the act of expressing desires places bottoms in a feminized role, one deemed inferior within the hierarchy of masculinity. But instead of being labeled as sluts, gay men are branded with terms like nasty bottom, reinforcing the idea that desire, when expressed from a position perceived as subordinate, is something to be ridiculed rather than respected. This stigma is so deeply ingrained that many men outright reject the label of bottom, even when they exclusively seek tops. To avoid being associated with femininity and submission, they adopt defensive identities, often labeling themselves as verse. For those of you who don't know what verse means, that basically means versatile. It means that I top and I bottom. So they call themselves verse, or refusing to mention preferences altogether. On dating apps, profiles frequently include phrases like no bottoms or masculine only, not just to express preference, but to signal an affinity for tops while avoiding the admission of being a bottom themselves. It's less about attraction and more about expression, the inclusion of masculinity, distancing oneself from the stigma attached to being on the receiving end of penetration. The issue stems from the fact that despite the outward appearance of masculinity, such as deep voices and facial hair, men in the receiving position are still inherently occupying occupying a feminine position. This is because within sexual dynamics, the female plug is the receiver and the male plug is the giver. In this context, receiving is aligned with femininity, while giving is associated with masculinity, irrespective of a person's mannerisms. The problem arises when these men are unable or unwilling to accept this reality, rejecting the idea of being in a feminine position even though they are performing it. This rejection is rooted in societal conditioning that equates femininity with weakness, leading to a disconnection between their roles and the cultural stigma surrounding it. The phrase masculine only serves as a gatekeeping mechanism, reinforcing the belief that desirability is reserved for those who embody traditional masculine norms. This not only excludes feminine presenting men, but also perpetuates a toxic cycle where attraction is less about connection, more about status. Even in relationships, bottoms often find themselves expected to shoulder emotional labor while tops maintain detachment, further entrenching the imbalance of power. The obsession with masculinity as the gold standard fractures the community, turning relationships into competitions for validation. Black gay men, having grown up under the same cultural conditioning as their heterosexual counterparts, often find themselves chasing the same prize. Masculine men who embody the very ideals they were taught to worship. This pursuit can lead to toxic dynamics where affection is withheld as a form of control and vulnerability is seen as a liability rather than a bridge to intimacy. The result is a community fractured by its own indoctrination. A space where love becomes conditional, self worth is measured by external approval, and authentic connection is sacrificed for social capital. The same patriarchal dynamics that oppress women in the broader world are replicated within queer spaces, ensuring that the prize mentality continues to harm even among those who understand its weight all too well. For queer black men, the dynamics are different but equally damaging. Taught that they lack the masculinity that society values, many seek validation from straight men in an attempt to gain the approval they have been denied, rather through sexual encounters, mimicking hypermasculine traits, or align themselves with straight men. They strive to prove that they are just as worthy of desirability and respect. Their worth is often measured by their proximity to straight black masculinity, reinforcing that hierarchy that keeps them on the margins. Even straight men are trapped in the cycle. Though positioned as the ultimate prize, their self worth is still dictated by other men. They constantly seek validation from their male peers, competing in displays of dominance, financial success, and sexual conquest. They need to prove this need to prove themselves creates a culture where male bonding is built on hierarchy rather than genuine friendship. Straight men are not just competing for the attention of women, they're competing to be recognized as the most powerful, the most respected, the most dominant among men. Their relationships with each other, which The relationship with each other become performative, dictated by who holds the most status rather than who offers the most trust and support. This relentless competition poisons our relationships, reducing them to transactions of power rather than spaces for vulnerability and care. Instead of fostering connection, the prize mentality creates distance, where everyone is fighting to be chosen or fighting to prove they are worth choosing. As long as validation holds more value than intimacy, true emotional fulfillment will remain out of reach, and a cycle of competition will continue. The Black community cannot continue to glorify men while simultaneously shaming boys who internalize that same glorification as desire. From an early age, all members of the community are taught that men are the highest standard of power, desirability, and validation. Boys grow up watching their mothers, sisters, and peers center their lives around men, making sacrifices for them, prioritizing their needs, and seeking their approval. They see how straight men are revered, how their attention is considered a prize, and how their presence is treated as inherently valuable regardless of effort. Yet, when some of these boys begin to develop attraction toward men, whether romantic, sexual, or social, the same community that taught them to idolize men now turn against them. They are ridiculed for a desire that was conditioned into them, a shame for responding to the very hierarchy they were raised to believe in. If men are the highest objects of desire, then why is it acceptable for women to seek validation but unacceptable for queer men to do the same? The contradiction is never acknowledged. Instead, Black men are made to feel as though their attraction is unnatural, perverse, or betrayal of their masculinity. This contradiction fractures identities. Black gay men must navigate a world that constantly affirms men's superiority while simultaneously punishing them for desiring men. They are expected to either suppress their attraction entirely or frame it in a way that is more palatable, perhaps through hypermasculinity, secrecy, or by positioning themselves in roles that align with patriarchal values. They are told that their love, their attraction, their very existence fall outside of what is acceptable within the community. Meanwhile, Black women are allowed, even encouraged, to build their self worth around securing a man's love and approval. They are socialized to believe that a man choosing them is the ultimate validation of their desirability and worth. But Black gay men who have absorbed the same messages about men's value are denied the space to seek that same validation without ridicule or rejection. This selective enforcement of the prize mentality reveals its true purpose: to uphold the patriarchy, not to foster genuine love or connection. Until the Black community reckons with this hypocrisy, queer Black men will continue to be shamed for simply responding to the values they were raised with. The issue is not that Black gay men desire men, it is that they are punished for following the very framework the community has built around masculinity. If men are the prize, then why is it shameful for some of us to want them? The community cannot have it both ways. Either we dismantle the prize mentality altogether, or we acknowledge that its consequences affect us all, queer and straight alike. All right, y'all. Because I'm getting so few views, I'm not going to be reviewing another chapter tomorrow. We are at the end of Pride Month, so the book is available on Amazon. Um, I think there's a lot of good material. I mean, I've only gone through 4 chapters, but there's a lot of good material here. So if you're interested, you can get the book. Let me read these comments before I get out of here. It is about desirability. That's all it is. All about it in America, because a society that taught us that mess is artificial, it's not natural, it's forcing. It's crazy how they do this. Yes, they're sending a lot of mixed messages. I'll tell you, a woman knows more of the man than the man know the man or their native, which they know they don't, which they already know is to oppress others. Well, the thing is that a man knows a man more than a woman. I mean, I'm sorry to say this. I know that we can't compete against women when it comes to certain things. We can't bear children. But at the end of the day, men form bonds with other men. Even as children, they form these bonds. And so it's really easy to segue from that bond to having a sexual relationship. Um, I don't think that I can compete with a woman, but at the same time, I don't think that women can compete when it comes to certain aspects of masculinity. Um, I know that they think that every gay man is feminine, but I know, gosh, there's these hyper masculine men, um, who nobody would ever suspect as being gay. They play football together, they play basketball, they watch sports, they do all the male shit, but yet they're fucking, and nobody would ever suspect it. And they can connect in a way that they can never connect with a woman. So I don't know why people are acting as if this dynamic doesn't exist. I don't know. Maybe you used to watch some gay porn. Maybe you can. I mean, I know that. I don't know. I think some of those scenarios are realistic. I don't want. Let me get off the porn topic. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of ignorance going around. All gay men are not feminine. And the irony is that they respect the ones who lie and hide, the one who live double lives, but the ones who put it out in your face and actually own up to it, we're the ones who get disrespected. So I don't know. And then at the same time they're going to condemn people for being on the down low when you have already taught them that they should be on a down low. All right, I'm going to get out of here because I need to get something to eat and I got stuff to do tonight. So let me read this last comment. No, there's two comments. Gay men know each other more than heterosexual men do, and lesbian women know each other more than hetero women do. That is really a lot of, yes, absolutely. Women know women better than a man, and a man knows a man better than a woman. Excuse me. So, I mean, there really is no way around it. I'm not saying that everybody is going to be homosexual, but there is a disconnect in heterosexual relationships that men don't understand women and women don't understand men. So there's that. And again, you already know that homosexual men are 666 billion times more manly and masculine than hetero men, as if two manly beings being together, same with women and two womanly beings. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know why they assume that all gay men are feminine. I mean, I anybody who's been in the community knows what actually goes on. If you actually were in the community, you would know that a lot of times the effeminate gay men are shunned, that the masculine men are the prize. So yes, you may see the feminine men going parading around, but that's not like the total, that's not the sum total of the entire community. It's a very diverse community. Anyway, I think I gotta go. Y'all have a good night. Um, I think I'm gonna go back to doing my anti-natalist content. Um, but be sure to post some comments.